Him and Tim went off somewhere.
I'm not going too good tonight, but I'm just glad that Mr. Hardy's not here yet, because I would be so embarrassed to be performing like this in front of a legend. So when he gets here, I'm going to go to water.
And you know, I hope Rod, when he arrives, I hope he realises that Simon Baker is a has-been, and he needs to recast The Mentalist, you know, to appeal to an older audience.
Yeah, I think they'd just drop the "ist" off the title if he did that.
Well, famed Australian director and producer Rod Hardy has been a mate of mine forever, I'm so proud to say. And what brought us together was a friend of mine knows a Phyllis McDuff, who's just written a book called A Story Dreamt Long Ago. And Phyllis thought that this would make a wonderful movie, and I'm sure Rod gets 100 books and scripts a year to read. But the interesting thing about this Australian story is it starts in Nazi Vienna in 1938 under the Third Reich, moves to the outback of Australia, and then goes back to post-war Vienna, where the lady, the heroine, tries to reclaim her lost fortune. She was Jewish originally. So I plan to hand the book over to Rod tonight, you know, with the hope that perhaps there's a movie in it. But in the meantime, it's wonderful, Simon, to introduce you to, and welcome back to Melbourne, his hometown, Rod Hardy. G'day, mate.
Good to see you, mate.
Oh, you too.
Good on you, Rod. Thanks very much for coming in. Nice to meet you after all these years.
It is a long time, too.
And what will be fascinating to find out where Rod Hardy's career started.
My career started at 3AW.
Small world. So did mine.
And in Latrobe Street.
Yes.
I remembered the main reception area had the Muzak. It was the beginning of Muzak, and they had those big tapes.
Harold Mitchell's music, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
Oh, and what were you doing there originally?
I was an office boy. It was my first job, and I was an office boy, and then I became a panel operator, and I worked with the Norman Banks and Artie Listers.
You would have been working under Bob Quinn.
It was Bob Quinn, and Miles Wright was the general manager.
Yes, yeah. How wonderful.
It was a lot of fun. I actually have fond memories of 3AW, where people used to wear ties when they would read the news. So
I believe you.
Very polite.
Would that be in the days of John Masters and people like
all
that?
Of that, yep.
Ormsby Wilkins, Claudia Wright, Norman Banks, Mary Hardy,
Dennis Gibbons, and you know the whole range
David
of them.
McGee.
Yes,
wasn't it one? It
was
used to be
times.
called the Station of the Stars, and it was.
I wanted to be I wanted to be like you guys. I wanted to be a radio announcer, and so I got my first job.
Unfortunately, you were destined for better things.
Move on. But no, I enjoyed it a lot, and it was a lot of good memories.
And how long were you at AW?
I was there only for a year and a half, and then I moved on to 3AK with the good guys. With Yorkie and Graham Boyd, and under Brendan Sheedy, who was my boss at the time.
And that would have been the GDB then, Television City.
At Channel 9. I got the chance to see the Beatles and the Rolling Stones in rehearsal at Channel 9 as a panel operator there too. So no, it was good days.
Exactly,
I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
And so what was the stepping stone to movies?
I always had a fascination. I lived opposite a cinema in Fitzroy, which became the Telly Theatre.
Oh, yeah, in Johnson
I lived opposite
Street.
there. So every Saturday afternoon I'd go into that theatre. We'd pay our ninepence to go and watch the movie. And as the lights would come down, that magical sort of moment of you get taken on another journey. And I never forgot it as a kid. So and nobody in my family was ever part of the entertainment industry apart from my grandfather, who was a world champion cornet player who travelled the world playing for steel bands. He was the only one, so it was kind of nobody thought I was serious when I said I want to be working in television and film.
Yeah, and of course television was your first move.
Very much my first move. Crawford Productions. After working in radio, I became a music editor at Crawford Productions on shows like Division 4 and Hunter and Homicide and those kinds of things.
Were you working with Chris Pettifer?
No, I wasn't, but I know of Chris as well.
Were you working with Hector, perhaps?
With Hector. Hector was very much part of my life and opened the doors to many things. We were young. I was a director at 21. And, you know, being paid nothing. At Crawford, you'd work many hours, and they'd say, you can take no overtime, but you could take time off in the loo. And that meant you just got days off if you weren't busy.
I didn't mean in the loo, like in the bathroom.
We would joke about that, I must say.
So what were some of the shows you did for Hector?
Well, I started off as a music editor on Hunter. And then Division 4, and then there was another young guy working as what they would call as a blocker at the rehearsal stage. His job was to work out where the actors would move and camera block it. And he wasn't really enjoying the job, and I was doing something else. So we swapped jobs one day without telling anybody, and I went to work with the actors on Division 4, and he went and took over my job as an integration director, which is putting all the pieces together.
Right.
And I enjoyed working with the actors, and they enjoyed me, and that began my career as a director.
And see, that's why I first met you, because I was at Channel 9, and that's where you made both Hunter and Division 4.
That's exactly right.
In the old Studio 1,
I would sit in that studio at 3AK with Grantley D. In those days, and I'd look out the little glass window that led onto the hallway, and I would see you walking past doing your job. You'd
right
always
opposite
wave.
the lift there, wasn't it?
Very friendly.
Yeah, we've known each other 50 years, it seems.
It is 50 years.
It's fantastic,
I was
isn't it?
I was a young child at the time.
Do you remember Jock Blair, who did props, I think, for
Jock
Hector?
Blair, and then went from there to Crawford's and produced a number of the mini-series that I did for the South Australian Film Corporation.
And David Charles, who was floor manager on those shows.
Who then became
He was a politician.
Politician in San Francisco. He was like an embassy person.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Do you keep up with any of these old mates?
You know what? You run into people all the time. I live in Los Angeles now, and I come home a lot to see my family and whatever. But I do run into people all the time.
Going from the music editor, and I guess a music editor's job is to be good enough to make sure that the music adds to a show without distracting from the action on screen.
Yes.
How do you go from that into actually directing? How was it the first time you had to direct somebody to say, I want you to do this, I want you to do that?
It was very challenging. You know, I held all these actors in awe. And so I learned very quickly that really they need you to know what you want. So that first step was to learn that lesson, and I did. And because I was in radio and I loved music, music editing seemed to be the first step to get into. And of course, in those days, there was nothing, everything was on disc. So you had to select music to fit the drama and then edit it down to fit in. So you're watching every frame and watching the nuances of filmmaking. So I grew to love it and became a director.
Yeah, and when you're directing a TV show, do you do that, Rod, from the floor or from the control room?
It depends on the productions. Back in those days at Crawford's, we'd have up to 4 cameras. So you'd be in a control room, you've worked out all the shots, and at stages there, you're also the switcher. So you would direct completely from the control room.
With 3 cameras?
With 4 cameras at times on Matlock Police. But I was lucky enough, and when I first started to direct, I was in fact what they called a blocker, because Homicide was done with 4 different directors, in a sense. There was somebody who would do the film exterior scenes, the action sequences. They weren't allowed, the actors didn't say a lot of dialogue on the film scenes, the exteriors, because those directors were not known as being good actor directors. Then you'd come into the studio and rehearse with a blocker, who was me, to work out where the camera shots were. We would call a person, the producer, who was really the dialogue coach, the dialogue director. Then you would take it from there after rehearsing. It would go into the studio, and there'd be Ian Crawford of the Crawford family who would be there switching it. So I sat between him saying, what the hell do you think you were doing with this, to dialogue coaches talking with actors, and it became, it's sort of, it's the best, I think the best film school you could ever have in your life. And I had that for over 2 years of just being between people who knew their craft, and then I was able to step in and become it myself.
Do you get to a point then where you can look at a script and, knowing the actors because you've worked with them before, you can visualise how that scene's going to look just by looking at a script?
You know, in a way you do, because when you're using video, we were doing a lot of things with video, the video interiors, and I'd have to write down the shot. Camera 1 would take the medium close-up, camera 2 would be doing a shot that would start on the close-up of the glasses and pan around the room. So I got to get so used to, I got so sick of writing the long shot of what it was about, I would write down camera 2 follow. And what it did was, it was a whole discipline about, I would have to then explain the shot to a cameraman over from the control room and get it done quickly. So you got to know how to put the story dramatically on screen, and
because you were churning them out, weren't you?
Churning them out. We were doing, you know, from Sullivans was 5 episodes a week. We were doing that over 6 days a week, and it was pretty much a challenge at times.
Now, as you know, Hitchcock always did a storyboard for every scene. You wouldn't have had time to have done that.
There was no time for storyboards. No. You would, you know, certain sequences when you would shoot the exterior scenes of Sullivans, that was on film, so you had a chance to do a bit more action. You might do some, you'd do a shot list definitely, but stick figure drawings were always the way to go.
Did you ever have the scare, Rod Hardy is our special guest, ever have the scary experience on television of directing live drama to air?
I never have, but I'd love to.
Yeah, Rod Kinnear did a lot of it at Nine, as you know.
That's true.
Tragedy in a Temporary Town.
They try it occasionally on television in the United States now, and they've been doing it recently with musicals, big musicals.
Oh, that's
yes, Grease the musical,
yes,
and all that
and things like that.
Yes.
They're actually creating that.
And would they be miming the songs, I guess?
They are most of the time, but but just the heartbeat. To me, it reminded me of being on radio. When I was a panel operator, even just being a panel operator on radio and having to get everything timed and worked out, the adrenaline rush and things.
Don't you agree, Rod, that everybody works at their best when you don't get a second chance, when it's live?
It's just like life, really, isn't it?
I mean, really, it's better than that second take, isn't it?
I totally agree with you. Yeah. Totally agree.
Apparently, Frank Sinatra was very difficult to work with. You know, he was a one-take man, and no, I'm not going to do that again, and was very difficult. I'm sure you heard stories about him.
There are actors like that, you know, in today I've had the fortune of working with some really terrific actors overseas and here. Yeah. My dear friend Paul Cronin on Sullivans and Solo One. And
I hope you get to see him while you're here.
I'm going to make sure I do. He's a dear man.
Now, we're just jumping ahead a bit, Simon. Why we played Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, and I sent you an SMS to that effect during the week, and you'd know why.
Thank you.
And we're jumping well ahead of your career here. One of Rod's triumphs was a remake of the movie High Noon, and it was absolutely, normally I don't think remakes work, but boy, it had a punch. And I believe you had a lot of trouble with snowstorms during the making of that movie.
Well, you know, it's in real time. It starts just after 9 o'clock in the morning and finishes by noon when in comes the bad guys.
Of course.
So you've got to tell the story. We shot this film over 18 days. Wow. In Calgary, in Canada, at the beginning of winter. So, of course, every day there was different weather. The first day there was an absolute snow blizzard that whited out the whole town.
And you didn't want any snow in the movie at all.
Well, if we had it day one, I knew that by day 3 or 4 it would be gone because it was going to, as it did.
Yeah.
The crazy producer who was on the show was screaming, "Bring in the snow machines!" And we were shooting Calgary, which had the Rocky Mountains in the backdrop a lot. And I just knew if we started with snow, we'd be in trouble because you had to keep manufacturing it all the time. And I wanted to use the difference with my High Noon was that it was on a bigger scale. The real one, which I think is the better one, was made in the studios at Warner Brothers in Los Angeles.
What a classic.
And everything was shot tight because they had palm trees above the buildings. And where I went the other way, I decided to make the landscape part of the environment.
Yes.
But it was a challenge, but a lot of fun. I love westerns. I've made about 5 or 6 now.
Interesting thing, I know you worked on the movie with Henry Silva, who was originally a bad guy in the first High Noon.
That's very true.
Yeah,
and then the Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, wow.
Many things, yeah. He was an interesting
Was that
character.
a remake of Manchurian Candidate?
No, sure, I wish it was. First was a movie that I made in 1979. My first picture here was for Tony Caine, who was quite a well-known Australian film producer who lives and works in both the US and here.
Yeah.
And I read the screenplay and I thought, this is a great spoof about vampires. The world had changed because vampires couldn't just go out and bite into anybody because AIDS was coming on and hepatitis and all these terrible things. So they decided they were going to manufacture their own milk and send it out to their tribes. They would get in unemployed and university students and pay them money and then hypnotize them and take their blood away from them. So it was, and I thought it was a great spoof. And I went in for the meeting with Tony Caine and I was ready to say, this was really, and he said, I want you to know one thing. This is a very serious film. And that was the beginning of my career in filmmaking, really, because I directed first.
The beginning of it.
Yes.
That's fabulous. Yeah. In terms of movies and the budgets that come with them, again, going from Crawford's, doing the Sullivans, which was great, how do you go from that to then doing a movie where there's multi-million-dollar budgets and sets and things which...
Do you know, filmmaking and television making is the same worldwide. The grips look like the grips, whether they be here or they be in Shanghai, China, or whether they be in England or whatever. So the jobs, you know what the position is, and everybody does their thing. So the money becomes, in one way, a hindrance. And usually the more you've got, the more you need. I was lucky when I went to the States, having had the experience of, doing shows like Neighbours and Sullivans and all those things, getting things done quickly. I would do TV movies that were done in 17, 18, 19 days.
Like High Noon.
Like High Noon and a number of other westerns and various things. So you got a chance to do things and think on your feet.
Yeah. They must have been thrilled, the backers, that you were working so fast.
Well, they were most of the time, but not all the time, because you know things go wrong on film sets.
Yes.
In many ways. So you know, I'd rather be doing a 25-day TV movie than a 17-day, but you know that's what you get.
Have you also written some scripts?
No, you know what? I've worked with writers. You know, funny enough, I was talking to Simon. Simon is a writer, you know, and has developed a screenplay.
I'm aware of that.
That feeling of when you finish the last page and it's your thing. I work with other people because the discipline I find just to be too much. To be, you know, I come up with great. I love working on ideas and then working it with a writer and collaborating together to make the right thing happen. So.
Okay, now two aspects of life. I wonder if you've been involved with either. We know you started at 3AW. Have you done any radio through the years, like Talkback, for example, Rod?
No, you know, I've thought about it a lot because I love radio. I think the idea of having an audience there and having an instant quality to it is good, but I've never really got. The film and television business has taken up my life.
I know. And the second thing, have you directed live theatre?
You know, I did it many years ago, but I haven't done it recently. I enjoyed it a lot because what you did, you had the chance of working with the actor in rehearsal is when you do your work. And then it's left to them. And watching people take advantage of things and use the stage to the best of their abilities is really terrific.
So, look, I hate to do it, but we'll take a break. There's so much we want to ask. Rod, Vision 4, a Crawford production. Memories, Rod Hardy?
A lot of memories. Good times with great people like Jared Kennedy and Chuck Faulkner and... a whole right. Ted Hamilton.
Oh, yeah, Ted we speak Hamilton. To a lot. He's in Sydney these days.
He is, yeah, no, but Crawford Productions, they gave me my first opportunity, and I'm forever indebted to them, and I tell you, it's one of the best film schools that I went to.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big rap, isn't it?
Yeah. I was also lucky when I got to direct. I was kind of the bridesmaid. I'd do the second episode of Sullivans and the second episode of Solo One and those various shows, so always the bridesmaid.
But good news is, Ken tells me, I'm not sure if it's true, that all these shows are now available on DVD. Are you getting royalties for these?
Oh, you're kidding me. Australian directors get very little from that sort of stuff. I wish they did.
Ken, is it true? Do we go to a shop? Where do we buy these shows?
Listen, I've been through this so many times with you, and you take no note, but I'm going to be pleasant to you in front of Mr. Hardy. Welcome, Mr. Hardy.
Thanks so much for that.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the program. Flip, you need to go to the Crawford Productions website.
Oh, yes?
Every one of those Crawford Productions, Homicide, Division 4, Matlock, The Box, Sullivans,
Flying
they're all
Doctors.
You cannot get them in the shops.
The Henderson Kids.
You must go to the Crawford Productions website. You can order them there. And as I do, Mr. Hardy, I sit back and I watch them. And I have to ask you, because we've asked Ian Crawford when he's been in the studio, what was it like in those days? Because, of course, television, relatively new in this country, even at that stage. But for people of Melbourne to sit back and watch their own city on television, it must have been absolutely fascinating for them.
Yeah, it was. And I got to tell you, shooting around Melbourne for all of these shows was always a pleasure, because people in Melbourne loved the fact that Homicide, the alleyways, the laneways were all part of Australian history.
And
now
that,
too.
I reckon, was originally based on Crawford's radio drama, D24.
Roland Strong was the person who did that, and
exactly.
That's where it did come from. Dorothy Crawford.
Yeah.
What a great family, and God, what a history
Glenda
they've
Raymond
got.
and
all
so
of that. Yeah,
yes,
most definitely.
Wonderful.
You sit and watch those DVDs now, and they are such a fascinating chronicle of this city in those days, the 60s and 70s in particular. You just see Melbourne of that era come to life. It's just wonderful. I love them.
Are you aware there's a new biography on Hector, simply called Hector?
Actually, somebody mentioned that to me a few days ago. I must get it. Yeah,
I'll try and get it for you if you don't have access to it.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, as I glance through your website, which lists so many of the things you've done, I'm struck by the fact that you've worked with almost everyone I have ever adored on the big screen and small screen. So I'm just going to throw a few names at you, because I'm currently watching a series at the moment called Boston Legal, which stars an actor who I think is fabulous, James Spader.
Yes.
You worked with him?
I worked with him on The Practice. And I think that was the beginning of his time with David E. Kelly, who was the writer-producer on it. He was an absolute delight. People had said to me, he's going to be difficult. I found that in day one, we discovered that we had an interest in wine. He very much knew a lot about Australian wines.
Okay, yeah.
And he was also a foodie, so he told me how to cook a turkey at Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
But a very clever actor. And,
he's very good, isn't he?
He's quite striking. And a film actor as well as a television actor, and there is a difference.
Was he the actor who was on board a plane a week before 9/11? Was that James Spader?
Don't know.
Who apparently was on board a plane a week before 9/11 and saw these guys acting suspiciously.
doing the run-through.
Doing the run-through.
Is that right? I don't know the story.
I think it was James Spader.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Well,
scary stuff.
You worked with David Hasselhoff.
The Hoff.
The
Yes, yes, I did.
The man is a legend. And just before you say anything, I have long said that when we have our AFL Grand Final entertainment, there would be no one better to get up on stage and belt out a number or two than David Hasselhoff, because I think he's got a very Australian nature in terms of he doesn't take himself overly seriously.
Well, funny enough, I think there's a bit of a combination of both. There's one side of him that thinks he does. But I think the other side, I think David is such a delight. I mean, he's at times been a misunderstood person.
It's just David Hoff now, isn't it?
Is that what he is? The Hoff?
Oh, there's an advertising campaign at the moment where he says, get such and such an insurance and get rid of the hassle. And so he's just called himself
Just the Hoff. That'd be right.
Now,
He reinvents himself in a very good way, that man. I'm going to tell you.
Now, coincidentally, an hour ago when Kevin Trask was here, you might have heard him, he talked about 1946 and the original version of The Yearling.
Oh, that's right.
Which, it's a saddest story. You remade that with Peter Strauss.
I did. It was Peter Strauss in the role that Gregory Peck played.
Yeah.
And we made it in Charleston in South Carolina. And Jean Smart, who's another fabulous actress, she was in the production. And then a young boy called Will Horniff. And it was the story of the young boy and the deer. And, of course, he has to eventually shoot the deer because of various things that have happened. And
I know.
It's a tearjerker. But it was a fabulous novel that made a really good TV movie.
Yeah. I'm just going to drop names from movies you've made. and you can tell us your memories of Chris Christopherson.
Oh, delight.
You worked with him on a movie called Two for Texas.
Two for Texas.
Was that a remake?
No, it was based on a novel as well, and it was the story of two prisoners who escaped from a Cajun prison, and it was the history of Texas during the Texian War.
Okay.
So there was the Alamo. They were on the run, and they went through various parts of history of Texas.
You would love that.
Oh, it was fantastic.
You love history.
I love horses.
Yeah.
Hate riding them, but love watching them.
Do they behave in front of the cameras?
Never.
Another name, and probably the greatest in my mind, one of the absolute greatest movie stars, Michael Caine.
Oh, delight. And, I've been lucky with some of these guys. I said before that I was in awe of actors when I first started working with them, and I still get to that stage where you can't overlook the magic of someone like Michael Caine.
Yes.
And I remembered asking him about, he was very big in the restaurant business and still is. He has a number of restaurants around the world, and I said to him, what is it about, what do you do to get a good restaurant going? And he said, it's the same as everything. It's the same as life. Give them good bread when they come in and good coffee when they go out, and they may forgive you for the bits in the middle. That's a great term. Now, Michael was a real delight, and he said one thing to me on day one of the shoot. Give me one print take that I'm happy with, and then I'll do as many as you want. What a professional! And that's exactly the way we work together.
Rod Hardy, when are you going to write your autobiography?
Oh, goodness, I just don't know who's going to play me if it ends up being a movie.
Kenny Rogers.
Kenny Rogers, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that have happened, but haven't we all had great things happening in our lives?
Now, Bruce and I have always loved Jack Palance, who was a wonderful Jack the Ripper, we seem to recall.
Yes.
What did you do with Jack?
I did Buffalo Girls, which was a Larry McMurtry novel again. The Lonesome Dove was written by Larry McMurtry as the novel. Wow. This was the follow-on to that, and it had Angelica Houston and Melanie Griffith and Reba McEntire, a whole range, Gabriel Byrne, a fabulous Irish actor, a whole range of really good actors, and it was a huge Western. We shot in Santa Fe, and then in the UK, and a lot of fun.
I mean, you've really followed in John Ford's footsteps, haven't you?
He's one of my favourites.
I'd rather mention him, all right?
The Searchers and Shane and a whole bunch of other movies.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, there's only a couple of TV series that I've ever watched twice. MASH was one of them, but the other one that I've seen the entire series and gone back and watched the entire series again was the XFiles, which I think that's one of the greatest series ever made. You enjoyed working on that?
I had a fabulous time, and it's a tough show because it's a big show. They were shooting it. It was done I was in the latter seasons, the last couple of seasons, and it was when they were shooting it in Los Angeles because they started off in Vancouver. David Duchovny wanted to come back closer to LA, and so they moved the show to LA. It's great. The first episode was written by Vince Gilligan, who became the writer and producer of Breaking Bad.
Oh, okay.
And a delight, a very clever man indeed. So, and Chris Carter, who created X-Files, was so passionate about it that he would sit on the floor and like a kid talking about his best playthings, and really was happy to change anything.
I noticed in the later series, which was, as you say, when you joined, there were a lot more close-ups of Gillian Anderson. Did you have a crush on her?
No. Gillian, and when I came into the series, David had been out of the show for some time. I did his first episode back in with Gillian and he and all the cast in the very first scene, and I was petrified because I thought that would be a challenging thing. David was a delight to work with, and Gillian and he, I think there was a chemistry imbalance there at times, but they certainly worked well together eventually.
You mentioned Canada a moment ago. I've seen some wonderful American productions out of there. Obviously, there are tax concessions.
That's what it is.
That's why they move out there, or is it because of the climate?
No, it's always about money.
And they're often horror movies, aren't they?
There is that.
Very often.
A lot of television shows are done up there. A lot of movie of the weeks are done there.
Yeah.
I've worked in Vancouver and in Toronto and in Calgary. Okay. So it's a nice thing to do.
I have to ask you, looking at a script called The Only Way Out or Grounds for Murder, I want to ask you about Henry Winkler, the Fonz.
And John Ritter was in that as well. They were very dear friends, and the producer of that particular movie had been friends with them as well. So she got them together, and we did this little movie. And Henry played a murderer, a bad man, a really violent character. And John Ritter was the husband who his wife had left him and went off with Henry Winkler, and John Ritter has to kill him eventually. So it was a different story, but it was we had such fun.
Yeah. Now, I know you haunt the Ramada Inn in West Hollywood. I don't think you live there. I think Gavin would might. But do you have a chance to stay in touch with some of these stars? And are you a bit of a party animal?
I enjoy life. I'm passionate about whatever I do, and I enjoy life. So to answer your question, I do stay in touch with people. I still have a chance to catch up with the various actors that I've worked with, and certainly other directors and various things. And Gavin Wood, you mentioned in Hollywood, is a dear friend. And
he writes for the Melbourne Observer each week,
He does, and from his suite at the Ramada Hotel in West Hollywood, one of the better hotels in Los Angeles.
You must have an amazing photo collection. Have you had photos taken with all these people?
Look, I haven't done as many as I probably should have. A lot of people that I know do it all the time, and I've just wished I had done it more often.
Yeah, and it's that hard balance, isn't it? You don't want to appear like a gushing fan when you've got to be telling them what to do.
Do you know what I said to Rod in an SMS during the week? The impossibility. I said, Rod, come in, but bring some props.
I carry them with me all the time.
What could you have brought? A snowstorm?
Oh, God. I could bring many things.
Names that come to mind. Kenny Rogers, of course.
Yes.
Did he do a Western with you?
I did a Western with Kenny called Rio Diablo. And
was this before the facelifts?
This was prior to the facelifts, and I have a similarity in looks at times over the years that people felt I looked like Kenny Rogers, and I remember
that's why he had the facelifts. He was sick of everyone approaching him saying, "Hey, Rod."
I was on the first day I met him after we'd started into pre-production, and his manager, who was producing it, said to him, "You should come up and meet the director of the production." And he walked into the office and looked at me, and his first words were, my God, you do look like me.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And I hope again it's pre-op, not post-op. Poor Kenny.
Oh, I'm waiting to hear you sing Ruby, Don't Take Your Guns to Town.
Yeah, lady, yeah.
Now, a question I wanted to ask earlier but never got around to. The difference between doing something like a Battlestar Galactica science fiction, you know, explosions and ships fighting and stuff, compared to a drama.
Yeah.
Which would be your preference? Do you love something that's a good tear-jerking plot and the actor and it's all in the facial expressions of an actor, or do you like getting let's blow this up and boom and
Well, like
crash?
all boys, we love our toys. You know,
Yes.
so I suppose as long as the drama is good. I don't mind whether they're on a horseback riding across the countryside or whether they're out in space doing something. As long as that story, that script, has a good story to tell, that's what I like.
And can you look at a script, like, I don't know how it all sort of works there, but if you get asked to direct a movie, do you then look at the script and go, no, it's rubbish, I'm going to say I'm busy? Or does it not sort of
yes,
happen?
I've been known to do that in the past. I mean, that changes as life goes on. You tend to go, what can I do with this?
So is there one then that you've missed out on where you've said, look, I'm a bit busy, can't do that movie for you, and then it's turned out to be like Star Wars or something, just for an example?
Yeah, I wish you tend to forget those ones as soon as you've passed on them. That if they've been successful, you go, I don't even remember it. So no, I don't have anything specific, but and I've been lucky enough to most of the time get things that I enjoy. But you know, there's the odd one. In the early days, I would say, no, I can't do this. They're the hardest ones.
It happens to everyone. Al Martino was offered Strangers in the Night and
there you
said,
go.
no, that's not going to work. That will never be a hit. Of course, Sinatra picked it up.
Well, my favourite one involving an Aussie was that Paul Hogan was offered the role in Ghost that eventually went to Patrick Swayze.
Is that right? I didn't know
apparently
that.
so.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about all your successes and triumphs, but we're all human. Have you had any duds?
Never in my whole life. Of course I have. Oh my God.
Have you had anything that didn't work or wasn't
You know,
box
and there's
office?
lots of reasons why things don't work. You know, firstly, you might look at it yourself and think this is what you think is going to work to the audience. If you work too much at trying to make the audience happy, you're going to be unhappy yourself.
Yeah.
So I think the things that didn't work, I've done productions that you think have worked out okay, and then the press get to it, and then I can remember doing a mini-series called Eureka Stockade with Brian Brown and Billy Hunter and whatever.
Yeah.
And we worked very, very hard on that production, but the press didn't like it. And so you kind of, and then on the front page of the Herald Sun, there'll be some scathing comment made as if it's the main news of the world.
How hurtful.
So, but you know what? That's what show business is about. You do your best, and then you hope to God it's going to work out.
Rod, what do you do if you're a week into a shoot and you realise that the movie's been miscast? What do you do? Do you have the freedom to say, look, I want to start again? And
No, I mean, if you're doing a feature film, that happens. I know it doesn't happen a lot, but it certainly has. It's more so than in television. Television's a precise art. Your job is to get it done as quickly
But
as
it might have
efficiently.
happened where you thought, no, someone would have played this part better.
Usually it's been done because somebody else in the production has insisted that I take on an actor. And
So do you have much say in the casting?
most of the time you get a chance, and at odd times I've been given actors that I wished I hadn't been, because I think there's a chemistry thing that a director can understand and certain producers don't understand about the relationship between a male and female actor and how it's going to work out. But no, most of the time you get a good chance to say what you think, and I think you've got to know the actors that are available. And there's been a lot of people that I've worked with here in Australia. When I go through the list of the people from the, Kylie and Jason in Neighbours, I directed the wedding episode.
Oh, you did the wedding episode?
That's the only episodes I did of Neighbours.
Wow.
So,
Wow, and they are the most memorable.
and I wished I got $1 for every time they've been played. My God.
Yeah. Now, what was it like doing December Boys with Harry Potter?
With Daniel Radcliffe. He's an absolute brilliant actor to work with, and very encouraging for those other young boys, because two of the kids hadn't really been on a set before. So, we had them doing school, and they had to really work hard at it. And he's such a professional. And having worked with all those fantastic actors on Harry Potter, he comes with many stories.
So they keep everyone entertained during the downtime.
We're running out of time. What advice do you give to an aspiring director listening to you tonight? What inspiration can you give him or her?
Be passionate and never say no. Never give up. You've got to stay focused on what you want. People will tell you that it can never happen, and you've just got to truly believe that you have the answer. And sometimes that can appear as being egotistical, but you've got to be to be in this position, I think, at times. You've got to have an attitude that you believe in, and I think that's the most important thing. Stay truthful to yourself and listen to other people's opinions.
You know, you're having a remarkable life. You've been very blessed. You're doing something that you love. I guess you figure you've never done a day's work in your life.
No, I know. Yeah, I've been very lucky indeed.
Rod, thank you so much for coming in. It has been absolutely fabulous. It's been an honour to meet you, and I can't get over when I look through all the names that you've worked with and the egos you must have had to have dealt with. I hope Phil hasn't been too out of control for you tonight.
Not at all.
You know, in almost 60 years of broadcasting, this has been one of my favourite interviews.
Oh, thank you, buddy. Good indeed.
Welcome home, Rod Hardy. Well, Simon, what a thrill having Rod Hardy live in the studio. And as I said at the start, to give up Easter Sunday to come in here when he's here for such a short time, has so many friends, I thought was very generous on his part.
No, that was fabulous. And what a success story. One of, you know, we all rave about, you know, Russell Crowe goes overseas and makes a movie, and Guy Pearce and all that. This guy goes overseas and directs all of those people.
And Michael Caine among them.
Michael Caine. This man directed Michael Caine.
Yeah, exactly.
How good is that?
And proof of his success, I said to Simon, have you got a resume of his life story? Simon hands me 14 pages of his credits.
There was a lot there, wasn't there?
Oh, we could have talked another hour. It was just wonderful.
Now,